What is it about bad games that makes them bad? I wouldn't have wasted so much money if I knew, but let's find out. Think of the worst game you've ever played. We're talking like Duke Nukem Forever levels of atrociousness. What do you think makes them so terrible? There are plenty of good reasons. Bad story, nonsensical AI, frustrating controls, and terrible voice acting.
Watch out! It's a monster!
Let me take care of this.
But I don't think any one of these reasons individually gets at why bad games are so truly miserable. Good games are a no-brainer. They're engrossing and they keep us attached. But bad games, on the other hand, well, they trigger something especially painful in our psyche. They're so bad that they cause me to get philosophical, to search for some deeper truth about the nature of badness. And surprising to no one, psychology possibly has an answer. Disappointment theory posits that when people take risks, such as buying Ride to Hell Retribution at full price, certain expectations come along with it. You know, like, this will probably be good, or at least moderately entertaining. I mean, what could go wrong? Well, everything. When a game doesn't meet our expectations, sometimes we cry, sometimes we throw our controller, and other times we assume the fetal position and retreat into a childlike state. Why? Well, researchers say it's because we focus on what are called upward counterfactuals, mental simulations of the best possible outcomes. And when that doesn't happen, we get sad. It's bad enough you've wasted your precious time and your hard-earned money on a terrible game. But it's worse than that. There's always some optimal way to play even the most unplayable games. So unlike a movie where you can just sleep through the boring parts, with a game, you're forced to constantly engage with its badness, diving deeper and deeper into the abyss of disappointment. So today we're gonna talk about the worst of the worst. But before we get started, a little bit of a disclaimer. We're not beating up on bad games just to be mean. In the words of Bill Gates, it's fine to celebrate success, but it's more important to heed the lessons of failure. Like Clippy. So buckle up, we're about to look at some of the worst games of all time and what made them so terrible. Now there are a lot of truly horrible games because unfortunately there are just many ways that something can be terrible. It'd be impossible to narrow it down to a single definitive list or talk about every single one, but we've done our best to try and find the absolute worst, the pits in the main categories of awfulness. First up are the cynical cash grabs, hastily produced games that tarnish the good name of a beloved title. Double Dragon Neon's bland brawling, vapid Muzak, and fluorescent afterglow reminded me of all the things I hated about the 80s, but none of the stuff I loved, like, you know, playing Double Dragons. It didn't capture like any of the grittiness of the original. I mean, that was made during the 80s. There's this time period where people are moving away from cities, it's inspired by the Warriors, and instead Double Dragon Neon comes along and it's like a version of the 80s thought of in the 90s and then poorly executed today. Another similar problem is the lazy knockoff, and the War Z is the worst. It attempts to copy the martial law of DayZ, but it's just sloppy. Okay, aside from the blatant ripoff of the name, I think the real problem with the War Z is that it's not like an inspired work. I mean, DayZ was made by Dean Hall, a man who actually almost starved to death. So you can feel that desperation, and I feel like players, they notice those sorts of things. You can't just like phone it in, take the name, and expect people to think that one zombie apocalypse is exactly the same as some other zombie apocalypse. It's an important distinction. Next up, there's the morally reprehensible games. These include games that are titillation for titillation's sake. There's nothing really beneath the surface. So games like Dead or Alive Beach Volleyball spend more time focused on breast physics than they do on being a fun game. We don't even want to show you clips of it. This is PBS after all. The big problem with game designers using sex and violence is that they rarely have something interesting or provocative to say on the subject. People are upset at Lars von Trier's Nymphomaniac because Lars von Trier gives you something to be upset about. Dead or Alive Beach Volleyball, on the other hand, doesn't teach you anything about sex or even volleyball. One of the games I'd like to add to the morally reprehensible list is Carmageddon. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the only thing you have to do in Carmageddon is run people over with your car. You're a murderer behind the steering wheel. And I think one of the big problems is that games like Carmageddon reaffirm this stereotype of gamers being these antisocial murder machines. I mean, I think the good news is that we've actually moved away from titles like this, but you know, it's really sad. I mean, I feel like it's kind of like ruining things for everyone, you know? However, they are remaking Carmageddon, so What do I know? Up next, the terrible media crossover. Good adaptations like The Walking Dead or the more recent Batman games take the fiction as a source of inspiration and then go their own way. Bad ones fail to respect games as its own unique medium. One of the best examples is E.T. the video game, one of the worst games ever created. You want to talk about upward counterfactuals? Everyone loved E.T. The game was completely unplayable. I don't think you really understand how bad this game was. It was so bad, it almost destroyed the video game industry in the early 80s. We'll link to a great story about it in the description. As a side note, we're also going to add Street Fighter, the movie, the game, the great Ouroboros of terribleness, where a great game became a lousy B-movie and then an even worse game. How does this happen? It was already a game. Then there are the almost amazings, games that aim for the stars but fall quite a bit short. You know what's awesome? Tanks. You know what's not awesome? Trying to drive a tank Minority Report style with a Kinect. Steel Battalion was really difficult to play and needlessly complicated. While we like to talk about realism in games, there are definitely some limits. I don't want to take months of study to learn how to drive an actual tank. I want to drive around and I want to blow things up. Plus, the gesture for self-destruct was pretty much the same as the gesture for turning the tank on. I rest my case. Lastly, there's the impossibly difficult game. It's important to remember that there's a good type of hard and a bad type of hard. See our episode on difficulty for more. What we're talking about here though is just straight up the worst design. A couple years ago, researcher Jesper Juhl introduced me to a game called China Miner. Everything can kill you. Everything. And unlike Dark Souls, where failure is brilliantly predictable, China Miner never really gives you the rules of play. If game designers speak to us through the language of design, then this guy is clearly saying he hates me. Okay, so now the moment we're all waiting for, I'm gonna tell you what I think is the worst game of all time. It's Flappy Bird. To be fair, I'm a big supporter of casual, simple games. I play them all the time. So why do I think that Flappy Bird is the worst game of all time? I think that there are two reasons. One, I think because of its popularity, people found themselves in the position where they needed to self-justify their own addiction to it. So they would assign the game these values that I actually don't think that it has, that it would put you into this zen-like trance, or it was really well tuned, or whatever it might be. People are only saying that because it was the most popular game on the App Store for like weeks, and billions of hours of productivity were lost to it. Second of all, once you've sort of grokked the core mechanic of Flappy Bird, just figured out the physics of keeping the bird between the pipes, that's really about it. It's just a test of patience. I think that good games build upon seemingly simple skills and then reveal themselves to you over time. You really don't play Flappy Bird as much as you just tolerate it.
I hate this! And I hate you guys!
On top of that, people who played Flappy Bird, I'd like to believe that it's an entree to some like deeper engagement with games, that this would be sort of their pathway to discovery and finding new things. But I really do feel like it just reinforces this idea that games are a complete waste of time. And that's kind of a bummer. And that's why I'm putting it as the worst game of all time. So despite the excruciating amounts of misery that bad games cause us, they do serve a purpose. The wheel of badness does come back to goodness in the end, and sometimes games find a mark of brilliance in their terribleness, like Soda Drinker Pro or Deadly Premonition. And even when they don't, bad games serve as a reminder of how amazing good games actually are. In the words of Pauline Kael, trash has given us an appetite for art. So don't think of this as a condemnation of bad games, it's a celebration. Except for Golgo 13, that game really was the worst. So what do you think? What are the worst games of all time and why are they so bad? Hash it out in the comments, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe. I will see you all next week. Or you can come to Boston and see me at PAX East. I'd love to meet you and shake your hand. So hopefully I'll see you then. Take care. Before we went on hiatus, we talked about whether or not we need game reviews. Let's see what you had to say. BMT Lamb makes 3 separate but vaguely related points, the last of which is whether or not people's opinions are already colored before they come to a review. And I think that's certainly true because the way it works now, most sites kind of review their put our reviews out on exactly the same day. And yes, I think that does influence people's opinion. They've made their mind up before they even play the dang thing. Nick Jackson takes issue with my claim that it's more disappointing to play a terrible game because he argues that subjectivity is part of all of our experiences with media. I'm not making the argument that games are more subjective experiences than other people. I'm saying that the nature of that subjectivity lends itself to a higher level of disappointment because of games' interactive nature, because we're invested in the outcome and we have control over it as opposed to letting some terrible thing just wash over us. That makes it so much more tragic tragic when we play a game that is really, really terrible. So I agree with you. Yes, all forms of media have subjective elements to them. That's what we do as consumers, but games are special. Papaya Cat Productions, amazing name. I don't know what a papaya cat is, but it sounds delicious. But anyway, you make the amazing point that reviews can be post-experiential. That is, you should read or play something and then go read the review to help you understand the experience that you had, or critique it, or whatever you want to do to engage with that past thing. I think that speaks to the very nature and the flexibility of the medium of the review, that sometimes it can serve this very sort of quick, sort of off-the-cuff decision about whether or not you should purchase something, but it can also serve this grander purpose, which is to help us contextualize our past experiences. So, good point. Jeff Petriello makes the amazing point that the reasons that I outlined against game reviews and their utility are very similar to the reasons that people levy against video games as an art form. I don't think the question is whether or not games are or aren't art. The question is whether or not they're good art or bad art. Hence why reviews are so important, because if we don't establish a critical framework for how and why we play games, then we can't really make a good case for what their ultimate value is in terms of, its relationship to other media. So yeah, really good point, Jeff. Kyle Chapman says that Let's Play videos may actually supplant reviews as the way that we get critical feedback. I don't think it's an either or scenario, like either we have Let's Play videos or we have reviews. I think it speaks to the fact that Let's Play videos do something very different. They do this kind of like off the cuff momentary experience with the game, as opposed to a review, which might be more calculated, more thoughtful, etc., etc. But yes, they're two ends of the spectrum, and that's a really good thing. Andrew Donovan says that games have yet to find their Roger Ebert or David Denby, kind of this mass critic that people really respect, and whether or not I could recommend anybody. Well, I'm biased because, kill screen, but I do really like the writing of Simon Parkin, who started doing stuff for The New Yorker, and Tom Bissell, who writes for Grantland. Also, there's a guy named Tevis Thompson at Grantland that also does some amazing, amazing stuff. Yeah, those are some people I would recommend. Oh, Jen Frank also, she's amazing. And finally, some of your selections for your favorite GIFs. First up is Cameron Pinard. He recommends the Breaking Madden series, which is an amazing, amazing series everyone should read, about a guy who every week of this past NFL season tries to break the game by choosing something crazy that he can augment in the players. But this particular GIF is one of an enormous Tom Brady trying to be tackled by a fleet of tiny little Colts. It's adorable. And second is the amazing and ridiculous Commander Shepard head spin. It's kind of self-explanatory, but it's awesome.